Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Joy. I'm the Youth and Education Coordinator at Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition. I am happy to introduce to you Tim Stevens-Welsh. Tim has been a practicing advocate in Crit Tribal Court for about 9 years. As an advocate, he appears in legal proceedings, criminal, civil, and juvenile. Working for the judicial system is what sparked his interest in getting involved in trying to make changes for his tribal community. Tim is involved with the 7G Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to become a resource for Native youth throughout Native America to showcase athletics and academics. Tim also makes time to work with us, Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition, because he believes in our powerful message and the services that are needed in many communities, but most importantly, to create awareness that is needed in our communities and beyond. So welcome, Tim, and thank you for taking the time to spend with us today. This is being recorded. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the chat, and I have the ability to unmute if we get to a point where it's just easier to verbalize a question to Tim. You can just let me know. And Tim, I'm going to let you go ahead and get started.
All right, cool. Thank you, Joy. No problem. Thank you for having me. I worked with the Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition probably for about maybe a couple of years since I moved to Palma. And you know, I believe in the strong message and the resource, a strong resource that that the Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition stands for. And you know, how could I not, you know, jump on with an organization, you know, that has dedicated its time, you know, to help, you know, in one of the biggest topics that we face in Indian country, such as like domestic violence, educational component of missing murdered Indigenous women, but also being a part of the groundwork to help, you know, create, you know, different laws and push for different reform of laws that are regarding this topic. I'm from the Colorado River Indian tribes here in Parker, Arizona, where I'm currently at right now. And it's on the border of Arizona and California. So those of you who don't know where it's at, it's a beautiful country. We have a beautiful river that flows through our reservation. And some of you probably have seen me in headlines, you know, regarding water rights and everything. And and if not, you know, you can Google that. My main start out when I was younger, I've always been involved in my community. I decided to apply for a job with the tribal court back in like 2009. I knew nothing about the judicial system at all whatsoever, never been through it, you know, knew nothing about it. I ended up getting the job, and it was a job of where it wasn't a job that I wanted. It was a job that I was in a moment of like, I have to have it. So I took it, I got it, finding out that it was like a very, very fast paced, very, very underpaid, you know, but the interest was immediately sparked, you know, because it involved my top members' rights, procedure, law and order codes, ethics, you know, to the highest extent. And working there within that time frame, there was a couple of cases that kind of stood out to me, and a lot of them were, I was a civil judicial clerk at that time, so I handled nothing but civil. So I did handle, you know, the divorces, I handled the restraining orders, I handled adoptions, I said divorces, different things like that in the civil realm, child support. So I got to deal with some of the family oriented ones that, you know, and one thing that kind of stood out at that time was the way that the restraining orders were being handled amongst my people and with the court. And there was one that was being filed and refiled, but it kept getting dismissed because the person had an attorney that kept having it thrown out because our code didn't match what the procedure was. And that bothered me, you know, because this is a system, and this is a step that my people take, you know, to ensure their safety. and that didn't sit very well with me. So what me and another judge did is we got together, we worked together to kind of, how do we have this not get thrown out? And the best way to do that was to categorize the different types of restraining orders that are out there. You have injunctions against harassment, you have restraining orders, you have what tied with the Family Domestic Violence Relations Code, so we tied all those together. We made that procedure, and that was it for me, and getting to work with people, I realized that me being behind the counter, you can only say so much. You can't help. When you're across that counter, you can't give the advice that you want to give, because ethically you're just there to help them the process. You can't show them the process. You have to tell them about it, and there's a big difference. But I started getting personally invested. Like, how can I help? What can I do? And at that time, there was a few murders on my reservation at that time, that kind of like made me even more like, how can I help? What can I do? And so I made the decision to leave the court and become an advocate. So that was back in 2009, 10, 11. So I've been doing that ever since. I do it in my spare time. In my full time, I do work with the 7G Foundation. Shout out to the 7G Foundation on this side day. And I work with a native with Native Grounds, monitoring neglect, shout out to neglect, but also still get to have the luxury of volunteering in my own home. How I got involved in missing murdered Indigenous women was, and I have always heard about the issue and I've always pushed for it, but I was one of those ones who didn't know very much about it. What was the big controversy? Why is it so hard for missing murdered Indigenous women to be reported? And why aren't we on the same level when they issue the Amber Alerts? And that's something that kind of bothered me. So I decided to get educated about it. But also too, while in the process of getting educated and getting involved, my family went through something very, very similar that involved a relative of mine, my cousin's daughter, of being MMIW. And I'm not going to use her name, only because she's still on the road to recovery. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about, the steps that the family took, the trials and tribulations and the effect it had on the family, but the frustrations about, the different agencies that we were utilizing and the ones that we could have utilized, and hopefully that when this happens to somebody else, it's kind of like a frame to kind of go off of, because the problems are still there, on how to report and who to go to, who can actually help. And you'll find out, in your journey that a lot of people that we didn't know that could help or weren't supposed to help, helped in any way that they could, because this is not something that we're prepared for. I don't think anybody's prepared to handle this. We're prepared to bring up the issue and to rally up funds and to try to prevent this issue. But when it does happen, what's left for recovery? What's left on that road of a survivor? And what help can they get? And that's something that we'll talk about with that. And I know that my reservation is a lot different than every other reservation. So I want to, get that out there that, because a lot of the outside world likes to view, if they know one Native American community, they think they know all of them. Do we have similar struggles? Yes, we do, but similar and the same are completely different. And each tribe is strong in their own ways, and we struggle in many different ways, but in the end, the message is important that we all have missing, murdered Indigenous women that we miss very, very much, and we would like back home. And we want to prevent this from happening to other younger generations to come. So that's something that that I will try to resonate in this presentation. So last year would have been 4 years where my cousin had gone missing. I remember, seeing the Facebook posts, from her sisters and from her mother, asking if anybody had seen their daughter because they hadn't heard from her, and a little background, like on my cousin, had a hard life, there was some struggles, with alcohol and addiction already, and that's something that we also have to recognize, as Indian people, that our women suffer. There's no perfect victim, so just because they go missing doesn't mean that, oh, that's what that's what they get, because we do that a lot, when, and we have to realize that, and I get it, but we also have to be there for one another and sympathize for one another, that when it comes to things like this, is that we have to take them seriously, so, I do, there is no perfect victim out there, but because of where we come from and the issues that we face, it's what makes our women the perfect victims. And that's something that we also have to, recognize as well, is that there is no perfect victim. A victim is a victim, and with that being said, having my family, try to locate her, it's how it started, because, she would go missing and then resurface very shortly afterwards. It would, like, a couple of days is what we would call, her venture out days. But she would usually stay within the reservation. And our reservation is pretty modern. We're pretty diverse. So there's really not much you should really leave the reservation for. The nearest city is Las Vegas and Phoenix. It's about 2.5 hours. So we're right smack in the middle. We're like 30 minutes from Lake Havasu City. But again, we're right along the river. We have a lot of stores here. We have a lot of diversity here. So there's really not much really you really need to leave for. But as soon as there was no hits on where her whereabouts were, then it started, we started to get worried. We started, getting on her Facebook, looking through her friends, the whole nine, and as more and more time had passed, we had gone to, the law enforcement, to try to report with our local law enforcement, which is a CRIT. And with CRIT, the way that they handled it, I don't want to say that they didn't want to handle it. I just don't think they knew how to handle it, because I think their concern was, well, did she leave the reservation? She probably left the reservation, which means it wouldn't be their jurisdiction, so that's confusion one, and that was frustration one. So then, other than that, we have no idea which direction she went. Did she go in the Phoenix area? Did she go to the Las Vegas area? Did she go to California area? Like that, we didn't know that. We didn't know who she was with. We didn't know what was going on, and then the mother, and the sister decided to venture out and call different places, to kind of get the word out, that the daughter's missing. We have a big family here, so we kind of had to ask around, like, have you seen her? Have you been in contact with her? If you see her, hear from her, let her know that we're looking for her. and it was nothing. It was just dead. Like there was just no answers, no callbacks, no nothing. And I remember they called someone in California, and the person in California worked really well with the Border Patrol. And when they were working with Border Patrol, they told her name, and they told her, what was going on at this time. They couldn't label her missing because we still didn't have no clue, where she, if she left willingly or, where she was at. There was just so many variables still unknown then, so we still couldn't report her missing, and the family, was obviously frustrated at that time. And as they were keeping tabs on her, through immigration, just they had her name flagged, just in case she crossed over. Well, turns out she did cross over, but she crossed over from Mexico into the United States, in San Diego, Tijuana border. And then I guess on her way back, from San Diego back into Tijuana, that's when they stopped her, and they had asked her if it was okay, if she was missing, what was she doing, and her response was, I'm fine. My family to quit looking for me. Disheartening. Not something that you want to hear. The family wanted to hear. But there was also something in the family that we're not buying that. I can't accept it. And so what Border Patrol did was they kept her name flat. And the agency that they were working with out of California still kept on the case, and they started. Then a different dialogue had to happen with the family, was they might be running her, because she is an American citizen, that they're probably running, having her haul drugs back and forth from Mexico to the United States, going back and forth. And usually, that's what happens. And they usually say, that when they do have someone running drugs, that the girls go through on their own, but there's usually someone in front of them and usually somebody in back of them, whether they be like 3-4 people ahead and 3-4 people behind, always being watched. But after that initial questioning, her name, she hadn't crossed back over, so we didn't know if that was a mistake or then the worry level came up even higher. We didn't hear from anybody, for the longest time, but the mom and the family kept calling, the people, because she wanted people to remember her daughter's name, that she wasn't going to give up, and it was a pretty good length of time. I would say about 1.5 years, 2 years. Out of nowhere, they get Facebook messages from people from Mexico saying, "Oh, we have your sister or we have your cousin. We're helping her, and we've had her. She's been staying with us, and she needs money. And if you send this much money, like I think it was like $2,000, $5,000, and we can send her back, and da da da." And the family, they work, but they're not, who has $2,000, $5,000 laying around, so that was pretty sketchy, and these were recorded calls, because they were, and they were FaceTime calls. in watching the FaceTime calls, you know, you have my cousin who's just kind of sitting here with her face down, not speaking, and then you have two people behind her doing all the talking, you know, and that was scary, you know, and I, you know, we would have this dialogue between my family and I, like, I think this is kind of like a low-key ransom video, you know, and those kept happening, you know, and we kept asking, well, who are you? And where do we go? You know, and everything that we were all the information that we were getting, we were relaying back to the agencies that were involved. And then for a while we would hear nothing. Yeah, and then as we would hear nothing, more and more time would go by and the worry would set, you know, and there'd be times where the family, and keep in mind this is 2 years of not knowing where she's at, to finally knowing where she's at, to not hearing from her, then finally hearing from her, and then not hearing from her again, you know, then the ransom video, and then not hearing from her again. You know, so obviously they knew that their daughter was in trouble. They knew that their sister was in trouble, you know, but there's that helpless feeling because we're not in America, you know, she's not in America, you know, and how do we get her back? You know, are we going to get her back? And those were questions that would go to the family's mind, and they would feel guilty about feeling that way, you know, but it was because they felt so helpless. And having to hear this, you know, from my family, it broke my heart. It broke my heart to the core. You know, more, I think we were surfing the web one day because we decided to go onto a couple of websites where photographers would take pictures of Tijuana, downtown Tijuana, and there was a photographer. He is an American citizen, but you know, for him, he knew how bad the sex trafficking was in Tijuana, and he would pose as a tourist and a photographer, you know, and say like, I'm taking pictures of the culture of Mexico and yada yada yada. But what he would do is he would go to these parts of town where the sex slaves would be working in Mexico, and he would post them on his page, and families would be able to jump on there and jump through his pictures to see if they could recognize if there was anybody that they knew in that area. You know, so we were constantly on that page looking. The people that we seen on the Facebook ransom videos, we followed their Facebooks, their Instagrams, you know, and we saw that they were, you know, gang affiliated, drug affiliated, you know. So, and you know, when you're diving into getting to know this part of Mexico, it's scary because you have to realize that you do have your loved one that is there. And keep in mind, a couple of years had passed by, and it's not like you can just go down there and just take and scoop her out and bring her back home. You know, you can't do that as much as you want to. Well, jumping on this young man's page and trying to siphon through pictures and stuff, he would also share some other links to other people. And there happened to be this article that was written, and the picture on the article was our cousin. And in the article, the article would talk about this girl who was in America, or who was from America, and she was. It kind of explained her story, but in little, not too much detail, and it kind of. She kind of said that she would come in and she'd be hungry, and she would, you know, have her do like a little bit of work because, you know, my cousin would work on the little machines that she had, little candy machines that she had in her shop, and you know, and she would kind of get them to work again, and for doing that, she would feed her, she would give her a little bit of money, to kind of keep her going. But, she said that she wrote that story because she poses as a shop owner, but writes articles and uses that as a cover to keep the awareness going as well. So, that was another good thing, that we felt that there are other people in Mexico that are working to kind of help, but at that time, we're skeptical, just like how these people said that they were helping her, and they'll help her if we send $2,000, $5,000, but same thing with the article. We didn't know if that was another ploy to get family members to reach out and then have them say, oh yeah, well, we have her, I have her, I need $5,000 and I can send her back across. So we were definitely sketchy at that time. I think another year had went by, so this is a total of 3 years, not hearing from her, not having no contact with her, and then almost 4 years. I remember getting a phone call that they heard from her, that the undercover agent that was in Mexico located her, and they were working on a way to get her and a few others out of there and back into the United States. And at that time, it had taken its toll on the family because, when you go through something like this, emotions are high, and you have some family members who say, oh, you're not doing enough. And then some say, okay, well, you're doing something stupid, and, that causes a big, huge fight. So when that happened, I think a couple of the family members decided to try to go down and take matters into their own hands and try to go down and then get her. But that was a failed plan. And it did affect, the rescue attempt. It did hinder that. The GoFundMe, was a GoFundMe account was put up, and we all know, like, we're not the only ones with social media. People that sex traffic these people, that's how they operate now. And that's how they keep tabs on other people, is through social media. So I think there was a concern, and I think that concern was expressed to GoFundMe. That this GoFundMe attempt is going to get people hurt, get people in danger. So GoFundMe took it down, and at this point, it's like we had to trust the agencies that were dedicated to do this. Well, by God's grace, I'm sleeping in Palma, and I get a phone call from my family members saying that they located her and that they have her, Border Patrol has her, and that her sister's on her way to get her. So that was a feeling of relief, because everything that your family prays for, everything that they had gone through, everything, every fear that they had ever had, is gone. Every prayer that they had been answered, because there were times where I'd have to hear the mom, she would cry and she would feel guilty of, what if my daughter's dead? What if I never see my daughter ever again? And another fear was, because, us as Indian people, there's that closure of, with death, there's that whole, we have ceremony, we have a ceremony, on how we put our people away, and that was one thing that kind of like hurt the mom too. Sometimes it was, her fear was What if we don't ever get her body back? What if we can't put her to rest, the way that we're supposed to? So that feeling immediately went away. And I called the sister, and the sister, was on her way to go pick her up. But there was one problem when they picked her up. She was high, and they said it was a rough road back to Arizona. So at that time, there's that next step of what do we do now? So we're trying to call the same people that were involved from the beginning, and we're trying to call down here through our different programs, and no one knew how to handle it, because programs have their specific set, criterion on who qualifies for the program and who doesn't. And technically, she had been living in Mexico. Technically, she had been in Mexico for 4 years, so she wasn't a domicile on the reservation again. We told them about the trafficking. We told them about, the sex trafficking, but no one knew how to take it, and no one was equipped, and there was, we don't have any services like that to deal with trauma like that. And then obviously there was a question for safety, because in reality, she was here and then she was in Mexico. How did she get there? Obviously, there was that question of, well, somebody here knew where she was and someone here knew that someone took her to Mexico. And that was that other question, so we're pretty much like, well, we have her and we're happy, but how do we get her on that road to recovery? How do we get her healed? How do we get her back in her right mind frame? It required, a couple of people doing some unorthodox practices. We have a judge, who had a big heart and did what he could. Was he allowed? Was he supposed to? No. Am I glad that he did? Yeah. And I don't want to go into specifics because I don't want to get, this judge in trouble, and nor do I want to put any type of agency, in a scope of light, to where, it could be reviewed. But we did have a couple of people that did what they could, and, my family thanks those people, every day, because it's not something that you deal with. It's not something we're prepared to deal with. We have all these programs for MMIW for awareness and everything, and services, for domestic violence and everything, but we don't have any services for people who come out of sex trafficking, who survive sex trafficking. And that's something that was hard. So finally, when my cousin got better and she got into her right mind, she signed up for the therapy, all these agencies banded together. And that was the most beautiful thing that I had seen on my reservation in a while, was these agencies banded together and they did it to help her. But she was still apprehensive on talking to people about her journey. She let a lot of people speculate what they think happened to her. And I don't think it's because she felt comfortable, nor did she want anyone, because it's that one thing of where you come back and people are staring at you because they know that you were gone and you were missing for 4 years. And, she didn't like that. She didn't like that feeling of being looked at like that. So there was one day where, her and I hung out. And she came here. We went to go get something to eat. And And, you know, I told her tree, anything that she wants to do today, we could do. And, you know, while she was talking, you know, she unloaded a lot of information to me about the life that she had in Mexico. She doesn't remember how she got there, but she remembers waking up in somebody else's home. And the story that they told her was, yeah, you and your friends came here to party and your friends left you. You know, but you can stay here with us. We'll take care of you, and, you know, yada, yada, yada. And she didn't have any ID at that time, so she thought. So she thought she didn't have an ID at that time. And she was like, okay. Then they started throwing things on how she can help work off, you know, for them helping her, because obviously they made it very apparent, you know, that she owed them. And one of them was, you know, the drug running, you know, but I think at that time, you know, the fear had already been put into her, you know, of what could happen. So she had to go with it. Then all of a sudden she had her ID, you know, she had her ID where she can go back and forth, you know, so that's how she knew that something was up. And then when she got flagged at the border, like how we said, she said they wouldn't run her anymore. They pulled her back. And then that's when the sex trade was introduced to her life. They drugged them up, sold them, you know, and hearing her stories broke my heart. She talked about witnessing murders, people being murdered, police corruption. She talked about Mexico, you know, and she's like, a lot of people think that these people in Mexico are nice. She's like, they're not. She's like, it's horrible. She'd have to fight to survive, you know, because, you know, as prostitutes, you know, Mexican prostitutes who don't have, you know, who don't have a pimp, that's what they do for their work, and they're out there and they're being sold out there, you know, so obviously they're invading, you know, a local prostitute's territory, you know, so there would be many fights. And then when they were done with you, she said they would throw you out there and you'd have to live in the streets. She said, but then you always belong to somebody because somebody else would come along and claim you. And she's like, and it was like that the whole time. She talked about the girl with the shop, you know, that would help her. She talked about, like, you know, that she could only handle so much, you know, doing so much work in a day, you know, then when they would drug them. So it was just all a blur. She didn't know how long she was down there for, because it was just such a big blur. She would scrounge up money, you know, just to kind of go on the outskirts of Mexico to just to get away. You know, whether it kind of gave her, it was like her hope, her peace of mind. You know, and you know, she did say that she wasn't a religious person, you know, but she found herself, you know, staring at the churches, you know, because she's just, they were so beautiful. And then she found herself going into the churches, you know, and you know, praying for hope, you know, to live, to survive. You know, and she said that helped her get through it. She talked about, you know, she doesn't know if she had a baby or not. Um, she remembers the baby, but then she doesn't know if she had it or not, or if she was pregnant, or, you know, there's just so much, because, you know, the keeping them drugged up, and, you know, she just doesn't remember. She's tried to remember a lot of things, but it's just very, very hard for her to remember. Um, she's still on her road to recovery. Obviously, there's some lingering addiction issues, you know. But in talking with her, you know, I'm glad that I had that talk with her, you know, and you know, I think we sat here and we watched movies, a couple of movies during the day, and she was so fascinated with Wonder Woman, the movie. And, you know, for those of us, we know that came out a couple of years ago, and she was like in awe and she was loving it. And I had to forget, you know, I was like, hey, cousin, you haven't seen this movie? I was like, oh, sorry. I was like, never mind. And she said, well, no, when did it come out? And I was like, well, it came out like 2 years ago, a couple of years ago. And she was like, gosh, she's like, I was gone that long. She's like, I can only imagine, you know, how many movies I've missed, how many things I've missed. Um, you know, just talking with her, and I had to tell her, you know, like, cousin, hey, can I tell you something? And she's like, what? It was like, I just want to let you know that you're damn strong. You know, you're very damn strong. You know, I don't know if I could even survive that. Um, if I, you know, I probably, you know, I would tell her, like, you know, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I would have the willpower to even move forward. But she just said that, you know, I don't know. I don't know. I just had to, you know. She's very quiet girl. She's a very quiet girl, a very silent type, you know. So, you know, hearing her talk about it and talking about it with me, um, was was very interesting within itself, you know. And I told her, you know, how it got me, how her story got me involved, you know, to help other people and to talk about her story, and you know, and talking with her and the family, you know, it's one thing that they were very adamant about. It was, you know, tell our story, you know, tell everything, tell them that, you know, that she's not perfect, you know, none of us were perfect, you know, but we all had to do what we had to do, you know, and hopefully it'll help somebody else, you know. Tell Indian country, you know, that they're gonna come to obstacles, you know, and just to keep fighting through them. You know, surround yourself with people that will help, you know. And their thing was educate people about the missing murdered Indigenous women movement. Don't just post about it, you know, talk about it, you know. Tell people which resources they have, you know, and don't forget to tell other people's stories, you know. And that's something that they had always, you know, talked about. Um, and they also said too was, when a family goes through something like this, everybody has to remember that they love one another. And why they're doing this is because they have love for the family member that's going through this, and to not fight, because that's something that can tear the family apart as well, because of the emotion. You know, they just said to talk about it, be in it together, do it together and just keep going, keep moving forward. You know, and that's a story that I have, you know, of my cousin. And like I said, I don't want to share her name because obviously there's still that path to recovery, that she's not there yet. And hopefully one day she'll be able to stand here and sit here with me and tell her own story. And you know, they did want me to, you know, talk about, you know, the different types of abuse that had went on, you know, but for me, I kind of didn't want to talk about that because, you know, I don't want people to look at her in that way, you know. I mean, I can only do my part on what I feel comfortable with, you know, and I told, you know, and I'm glad that I'm entrusted with this story to tell of theirs, and I'm more than willing and more than glad to tell the story and tell their own story, you know, because I think that's very, very important, you know, and I hope that, you know, sometime soon that she can be there at that point in her life where she can tell her own story. You know, and one thing that I do want to emphasize, you know, that us as Indian people is that we have to start recognizing, you know, that our women are the perfect targets, you know, because of the issues, the social issues that we go through, you know, on our reservations with the alcoholism, with the drugs, with the abandonment issues, with sexual molestation. You know, it makes our women the perfect targets, you know, and it's getting to an all-time high, you know, and there's no specific numbers out there because the way that they're handled through different jurisdictions, different agencies, they're not being reported correctly. Yeah, and I think that's something that organizations like Shinwick and other California organizations in California are fighting to build a system on how each and every one is reported, so that way they are accurate, and that way we all have numbers to share on that same level. And I think the biggest part right now is that everybody has inaccurate numbers, you know, because you have some people that are miscategorized, you know, they could be American Indian, but they're identified as Hispanic, or they don't know which agency to report them to because they went missing off of the reservation, but yet they belong to a reservation. There's different issues like that, you know, and I hope that one day we'll be able to get there, you know, but until then, you know, we still have to do what we can. And I hope that, you know, this story, you know, is something that everybody can relate to, and you know, I hope that you can all share it with your people. And I like to, again, if you guys have any questions, I'm open for questions right now.
Okay, Tim, I'm going to take everybody off mute so that
Yeah,
they
no,
can ask you if they
yeah, no
have any questions. Give me 1 second, everybody. There we go. Change audio. I'm so fast with this. Attendees. I don't know if you guys can see, but I'm unmuted as I go down the list. Oops, that didn't work.
They also have the typing app too, I think, where.
Yeah, nobody's typed anything. I'm just trying to take everybody off mute right now. I'm about halfway through the list. So So if anybody has any questions, now's a good time to ask. We'll give everybody a minute to make sure nobody's feeling shy.
Yeah, no, don't be shy.
Okay, y'all are unmuted, so feel free.
Hi, this is Julie Andrews from the Native American Resource Center.
Hi, Julie.
Hey, and I was thinking about, and I had asked a question during the last time that you guys were on, but something happened to the audio about community and that tendency to keep secrets, and so I was just wondering, like, did you guys find out that there was someone who in fact did know what happened to her or where she was at, and then just kept quiet about it? Because
Yeah, that's another, and that's very disheartening too, is that, and she tries to remember for the life of her, because she knows that it's somebody that obviously, actually might have been a relative, actually. And that's something that she tries to remember, but she said that day she cannot remember for the life of her and how she got there. She remembers having fun, being in the car in Arizona, and then I guess a couple of weeks later waking up in Mexico, and that's something, and that's something that she does struggle with, the remembering. And then there's days where she doesn't want to remember, but yeah, the reality of it is, and I always tell my people here in Arizona, is that sometimes it's our own people, that put our own women in these situations. I hope I answered your question.
yes, thank you.
Thanks, Julie. Does anybody else have any questions for Tim? Well, what I'm going to do is Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Sophia Dodd. I'm from Indian Health Inc. in San Bernardino, and I was wondering if you had any, tips or advice or resources on how to build that trust again in your own tribe to be able to have the women that have experience, such things like this, be able to talk to each other.
I'm sorry, I did not get a portion of that question, because I think, and for those of you who have, your mics enabled, if you have background, if you can mute them.
Who was speaking? Can you raise your hand who the speaker was, and I'll get everyone else?
Jane McNeil, if you can mute. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just wondering if you guys had any advice or resources or tips on, how to help gain that trust back with
Mic is cutting
your
out.
own community members in your tribe to be able to talk with other women that have Can you hear me now?
You're cutting in and out. I'm trying to mute everybody else. I can't catch your name.
Gia Dodd.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just go down the list and mute everyone. Give me just 1 second, please. Let's go ahead and mute all, and then I will unmute you. Okay, Gia, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering if you guys have any advice or tips or resources on how to gain that trust back within your own community members of your tribe on the basis of, you know, talking to other women that have been sexually abused, you know, trafficked or anything around that type of criteria of, you know, being able to talk to each other and not be wary of, well, I don't want my personal business being out there type of thing.
You're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on my reservation, there was a few things that had happened. One of them was this story of my family, and then a couple of other stories were murdered women on my reservation that had gone unsolved and still unsolved to this day. And I think what sparked a movement is that we had a couple of leaders in our community take on the task of creating awareness and creating little freelance organizations. And one of them, his name is Raymond Meza, and you know, he fights against the war against drugs, but also it stresses to my tribal council, you know, that we do still have unsolved murders and we still do have, you know, drug dealers on the reservation. And you know, I think him being that voice and that advocate, people feel comfortable in going to him, you know, and he does run a social media, and he does he does tell people that whatever you tell me is in confidence. But also too, we have another young group organization here called MTAM. They call themselves Metams, MTAM, you know, and their name is actually the acronym on how to say women in the 4 different tribal languages here on my reservation. So that's pretty unique. But the approach that they took is the volunteer work. You know, like if women need help doing laundry, if they need money doing laundry, if they need detergent doing laundry, if you need a ride doing laundry or different types of things, they help you in that aspect. But they also open themselves available to talk, you know, and I think the biggest thing that I love about that group is that they take the opportunity to talk about their own issues and what they went through. Because, you know, we do have to realize too, in Indian country, that for many years, things were swept under the rug or don't talk about it, you know. And I know in for instance, for myself, you know, growing up, you know, with being abused and everything, it was always told like, oh, don't talk about it, you know. But as I got to a certain age, it's like, no, that's not my shame to carry, you know. So I'm going to talk about it because I'm the one that shouldn't be shamed, you know. I'm the one that had to live with this, and in order for me to move on, in order for me to become greater and to help more people, I have to talk about this, you know. And that's something that we all have to start doing. And I think the more that we open that dialogue of ourselves, then to make people feel comfortable, then they'll start coming to you and telling you. But also too, I want everyone to identify the resources that they do have on their reservation, such as like behavior health. IHS has resources as well, or if you have private insurance, to talk to different therapists too. You know, that's one thing that we need to start doing as Indian people, start identifying the resources that we do have. They may not be perfect, you know, but which system is, you know. I mean, that's the approach that my tribe has taken. They're very small steps, but they're working. They're working very much.
Did that answer your question?
Great, thank you so much.
No problem.
Tim, I have a couple.
Yeah, it definitely did. It just gave insight on it.
Yeah. I have a couple questions, Tim, that are in the question queue. So one is, can you name some of the organizations that are available to the families and how to ask for the help?
I know. Even me living in Arizona, I do reference Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition a lot, because even if they're not the proper resource to help, they most definitely will help you find the exact resource that you need. You know, so that's who my go-to is all the time, is the Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition. They're an excellent staff. They have many resources that they deal with, you know, and you know, so I usually just say it's safe for me to point them in that direction, and if not, then they'll be able to get you to that right source for help. And again, that's Strong-Hearted Native Women's Coalition. They do have a Facebook page, and their information is on that Facebook page for contact information. And then also everybody has Joy's email, so go ahead and flood her email with all those information.
Okay. And on that note, we have another question. Oh, it's not a question, it's more of a statement. It says, let them know that the cartels are using our people, are using our people, our drug involved people are now also combining drugs and sex trafficking. So, and I think you did speak to that a little.
You know, in Southern California, that's a big, huge issue. Especially with our young Native American women, you know, and especially those who are already battling, you know, the addiction, you know, that they are a target, because everyone assumes that a lot of Native American tribes in California do get what we call per capita, and so they become a target, you know, for that, because people will even hold them for ransom for the money that they think that they get. You know, our women, you know, do get victimized all the time. They're targets all the time, you know, especially like in the San Jacinto area, Hemet, you know, and that's why one thing that I've always told my girls that I work with is, you know, use the buddy system. I think we've even equipped them with pepper spray and little blades, and we have them, you know, every time they leave the house. I know it's a nerve-wracking habit, but always share your location with one of your friends. You know, as a matter of fact, one of my friends last night, she actually told me that she was going to go out of town last night, and she was going to share her location with me. So me and my friends, we do that all the time. We share each other's location, and I know that one of my other friends, her name is Kathy, Beavers from Palma. I share my location with her all the time, you know, and I let her know where I'm going. And I tell her, if you don't hear back from me by the end of the day, call me. And if I don't answer you, then you know where I'm at. You see where my phone is at. You know, so that's something that always works as well too.
Yeah. I have a question, and you probably might know this. With the casinos, because I think that your cousin was at a casino, correct?
Yeah, you know, that's one thing that here in this area, you know, because like I'm on the border of California as well, and my reservation goes into both Arizona and California. But I did, you know, we do notice that even when we do attend, you know, the sex trafficking conferences, that the casinos is the biggest ground play for sex trafficking.
Well, one of the things that I saw was my daughter worked at the pool there, and in Pachanga, and she fought for wearing shorts that were long enough to cover herself, because she wasn't gonna, you know, let her cheeks. But then, so she was followed to her car one night after work, and security told her they were there for the guests, not the employees. So do you think that's changed in the last 4 years?
I hope it has. You know,
I mean, across the board. Are
no.
we working with the casinos to?
One thing that we did, and we had this dialogue in Tucson, in the last conference that we went to. Obviously, there's another miscommunication in between law enforcement, you know, and gaming regarding sex trafficking. You know, is it recognized? Is it enforced? Is it looked out for? Is it reported? I don't think so at this point, because otherwise we'd have more gaming offering different types of classes like that. And I know that for instance, my tribe doesn't have, that's not part of their orientation, you know, and as security, they don't have that as their orientation either. And I think they only bring it in when someone like me pushes for it to be brought in. And there is a group out of Phoenix that specifically does emphasis on that specific type of topic of sex trafficking in the gaming casinos. But are they utilized through all out, you know, the gaming world? No, they're not. And that's something that we also need to fight for too, because it is on our reservations. And also too, that's one of the biggest venues for drugs and the cartel. You know, I know it was here for a while for mine.
Okay, and then we have one more. It's not a question really, but Dean, one of our other speakers, has said that more of a comment. Thank you, Tim, for your very genuine and powerful share in the work that you're doing. So I think we all feel that way. That thank you.
Thanks,
for
Dean. I'm a fan of Dean's too.
So, what I'm going to do really quick, since it seems like, well, I'm going to give you guys one more chance. Does anybody else have a question? Did I miss anyone? I'm going to just scroll through the names here really quick and make sure. And it doesn't look like I see any hands up at the moment. So I'm going to turn the recording off quickly, just in case somebody has something that they don't want to share
Okay, yeah.
on camera. So hold on one second.